The
We
quiet
must
halls of
remain
Kensington
strong
Palace have seen
for the sake
whispers,
of our
arguments,
family and our
even royal
people.
rivalry, but nothing prepared anyone for this. Word spread fast. Something had happened between Queen Camilla and Princess Charlotte. A sharp remark, a moment of humiliation, and Catherine, usually calm and impossibly composed, reached her breaking point. What really happened behind those guarded doors? Why did royal guards tighten their formation? And how did a private family moment become the storm shaking the monarchy today? Before we unravel this emotional, twist-filled story, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell. It helps the channel keep digging into the stories the palace never once publicly dissected. And hey, share this with someone who loves royal mysteries as much as you do. The morning had started like any other inside the palace. Soft footsteps, muted conversations drifting through ancient corridors, a gentle breeze slipping through high windows as the staff prepared for another routine family appearance. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing hinted at the emotional storm waiting just a few minutes ahead. But sometimes trouble doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it hides in a single careless sentence, the kind that instantly changes the air in the room. Princess Charlotte had always loved these quiet palace mornings. Even in the midst of royal chaos, she carried a natural brightness, a spark that reminded everyone of her grandmother Diana. Fearless eyes, a soft smile, and a sense of quiet confidence. She was adjusting the ribbon in her hair, humming to herself, completely unaware that she was about to become the center of a tension-filled moment adults would talk about in hushed tones for days. Standing near the doorway was Queen Camilla. Her posture was stiff, her expression unreadable, though the guards on duty that morning later said they felt something different in her energy, something unusually sharp. Some days, Camilla carried away the crown with ease. Other days, it pressed harsher on her shoulders. And today, it seemed heavier than usual. Charlotte curtsied politely, as she always did. She had been raised with manners polished to perfection, not because she was royalty, but because Catherine believed kindness and respect weren't optional. They were foundations. But instead of a warm nod or a gentle smile, Camilla's eyes narrowed for a split second, enough for the nearest guard to notice. "Is that really what you're wearing today?" Camilla murmured, her voice low but cutting. A princess should look presentable, not childish. The words slid out like fine ice, quiet, cold, and with an edge that left no room for misinterpretation. Charlotte froze. Her cheeks heated immediately, not from anger, but embarrassment. She glanced down at her dress, a soft pastel outfit Catherine had lovingly chosen that morning. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't loud. It was simply Charlotte, sweet, elegant, comfortable, perfect for a child who was still learning the balance between royal duty and childhood innocence. But Camilla's tone made her feel small. Too small. There are many things the British monarchy hides well. Political disagreements, private illnesses, centuries of scandals polished away by public relations. But children cannot hide their emotions, not fully. And Charlotte's eyes shifted, just a little, the way they do when a child tries not to cry. And that was the moment everything changed, because Catherine had been nearby. The Princess of Wales had always been the embodiment of calm discipline. She handled pressure like second nature, navigating the stormy seas of royal life with extraordinary grace. But nothing, absolutely nothing, triggered her instincts faster than someone hurting her children. She appeared from the corner before anyone realized she had heard. Even the guard straightened reflexively, a subconscious response to the shifting atmosphere that followed her steps. "Charlotte," Catherine said softly, touching her daughter's cheek. "Let me see." Her voice stayed gentle for the child, but there was a flicker, a spark, of something far more dangerous simmering under the surface. Charlotte whispered. She said, "I look childish." That single sentence was all Catherine needed. The room tightened. Even the guards stopped moving. In palaces built on centuries of protocol and controlled emotions, genuine tension is rare, but when it appears, it's unmistakable. Catherine slowly turned her head toward Camilla. No raised voice, no dramatic gesture, just a gaze that carried more power than any shout could. "Camilla," she began, her tone calm in a way that seemed almost unnatural considering the situation. "She's a child." Camilla exhaled sharply, her own irritation bubbling to the surface. Well, she should start behaving less like one, she muttered under her breath. She'll be a working royal soon enough. It was the wrong thing to say. Very wrong. Because Catherine wasn't just defending her daughter's outfit anymore. She was defending her childhood, her dignity, her right to grow without being crushed by the crown's expectations. Charlotte is 7, Catherine replied, voice still low but firm. Unshakably so. She will grow into her role when she is ready, not when someone pressures her. The guards exchanged glances. They had seen Catherine handle crisis meetings, diplomatic events, even medical emergencies with absolute composure. But this was different. This was personal. Camilla lifted her chin, refusing to back down. Well, perhaps she should learn sooner rather than later. We cannot have... No, Catherine cut in. Just one word. Quiet, sharp, final. It was the kind of no that freezes the air. The kind that comes from a mother who has tolerated every stress, every demand, every unfair headline, but draws an unbreakable line when her child is hurt. Charlotte watched silently, gripping her ribbon with tiny fingers. She had never seen her mother like this. Protective, yes, but this was fiercer. This was a lioness guarding her cub. William entered moments later, sensing something had gone wrong before he even saw their faces. His eyes moved from Charlotte to Catherine to Camilla and finally to the guards, who stood like statues, unsure whether to intervene or disappear into the wall. What happened? He asked. Charlotte hesitated, then whispered, She said I looked childish. William's jaw tightened. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough for anyone paying attention to understand the meaning. He stepped beside Catherine, forming a silent wall around Charlotte without saying a single unnecessary word. Camilla's expression faltered for the first time. She wasn't expecting them to unify instantly, instinctively, without discussion. Catherine placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder and spoke with steadiness that felt almost royal in itself. Charlotte is perfect as she is, and she will never be spoken like that again. There was no shouting, no scenes, just truth delivered with absolute clarity. The guards would later say it was the most intense quiet they had ever witnessed in the palace. Charlotte exhaled softly, leaning into her mother, reassured and grounded by her presence. Catherine's hand remained protective, firm, almost symbolic. That was the moment the story began spreading to the palace. First between the guards and the staff, then the senior aides who recognized that this wasn't just a small misunderstanding. This was a moment that revealed fault lines inside the monarchy. A moment that showed Catherine's strength in a way few had truly seen. A moment that would change the dynamic in the royal household. A moment they all knew couldn't stay hidden forever. And as the royal family stepped out for the scheduled event a short while later, the cameras captured their smiles, but none of the tension behind them. None of the storm that had shaken Kensington Palace just minutes earlier. And absolutely none of the fire Catherine had shown to protect her daughter. The palace is a strange place when emotions run high. Its walls are thick stone, its windows tall and cold, its ceilings too high for sound to linger. But when Catherine walked away from the confrontation with Camilla, holding Charlotte's hand tightly, something unusual happened. The air seemed to move with her. Staff stepped aside without being told. Guards straightened with instinctive respect. Even William, who had seen Catherine in every shade of strength, recognized the shift. Catherine wasn't just upset. She was determined. And a determined Catherine was a force the monarchy had never truly learned how to handle. She guided Charlotte toward a quieter corridor, away from wandering eyes. Her steps were calm, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed the storm inside. Charlotte kept glancing up, unsure, her little fingers wrapped around her mother's. She wasn't frightened. She trusted Catherine completely, but she sensed the seriousness in her mother's silence. When they reached the secluded sitting room, Catherine crouched down to meet Charlotte eye to eye. "You did nothing wrong," she said softly, brushing a stray tear off her daughter's cheek. "Do you understand?" "Nothing." Charlotte nodded, though her brows remained tight with lingering confusion. "She shouldn't have said that," Catherine continued. "And if anyone ever makes you feel small, even for a moment, you come to me. Always." Charlotte whispered, Are you angry? Catherine paused. She didn't want her daughter to mistake protection for rage. I'm proud of you, she said instead, and I'm upset someone made you feel embarrassed. But I'm not angry at you. Never at you. Charlotte exhaled, relieved. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Catherine's. It was a tiny gesture, but it calmed something inside her mother, the fierce, protective roar simmering beneath Catherine's calm exterior. William entered quietly a moment later. He waited until Charlotte wandered to the window before he approached Catherine. What exactly did she say? Is that really what you're wearing? A princess shouldn't look childish. Catherine repeated the words without emotion, but William felt them like a punch to the chest. He ran a hand through his hair. Unbelievable. It wasn't just a comment, Catherine added, her voice steadier now. It was the intention behind it. Charlotte is 7. She's still learning who she is. Words like that can stay with a child for years. William nodded slowly. I'll speak to her. But Catherine stood. No, I will. William studied her face for a long moment. Catherine wasn't confrontational by nature. She avoided unnecessary fights. But when it came to their children, she could become unshakable. You sure? He asked. Catherine didn't hesitate. Yes. And that was the moment Catherine reached her breaking point. Not from rage, not from impulsive emotion, but from clarity. A line had been crossed, and she was going to address it directly, calmly, and without backing down. She didn't head straight for Camilla. She allowed herself a moment in the hallway outside the private lounge. She closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled, and released a spike of adrenaline in her blood. The palace had taught her one thing: control your stillness, and you control the room. When she finally opened the door to Camilla's sitting area, several staff members scattered immediately, sensing incoming tension. Camilla sat near the window, arms folded, as if she had been expecting this confrontation. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look apologetic. She looked defensive. Catherine approached with calm, deliberate steps. We need to talk, she said plainly. Camilla lifted an eyebrow. About what? You know exactly what. Catherine remained standing, asserting subtle authority, without raising her voice. Charlotte is a child, and she deserves respect, especially from family. Camilla scoffed lightly. I simply made an observation. Children in this family are raised with expectations. Expectations, Catherine replied evenly, not criticism. Camilla waved a hand dismissively. You're overreacting. That was the first mistake, because Catherine didn't overreact. She calculated. She understood emotion, nuance, perception. She was a mother, yes, but she was also the future queen consort, a woman trained to read people like open books. Catherine leaned slightly forward. I am not overreacting. I am responding. Don't mistake my calm for weakness. Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line. You may speak to me however you choose, Catherine continued, but you will not, under any circumstances, belittle Charlotte. Not her appearance, not her behavior, not her personality. Camilla shrugged. She must toughen up eventually. And she will, Catherine countered, in her own time, with guidance, not humiliation. Camilla's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to Catherine standing her ground so firmly. She wasn't used to being challenged in private, much less by someone who navigated conflict with deadly quiet precision. You're too soft on them, Camilla muttered. No, Catherine said. I'm protective. And there's a difference. Silence filled the room. But this silence wasn't discomfort. It was realization. Catherine had drawn a boundary, a clear one, and she had delivered it with such controlled strength that even Camilla couldn't push past it. She finally sighed, though it was unclear whether it came from resignation or irritation. Fine. Perhaps I was too forward. Perhaps. Catherine replied calmly, but there was a glint of disappointment in her eyes. Camilla looked away. Catherine continued. Charlotte is a child who will grow into a life that will demand everything from her. The least she deserves is kindness from her own family. Camilla didn't respond, and Catherine didn't push further. She wasn't looking for a fight. She was looking for acknowledgement, a shift, a promise that Charlotte wouldn't be treated as collateral damage in the complexities of royal life. After a long, tense pause, Catherine said simply, "I've said what needed to be said." She turned toward the door, then paused one final time. "I hope it won't happen again." Then she left. There was no dramatic exit, no slamming door. Just Catherine, steady, protective, composed. As she walked down the corridor, two guards passing by stepped subtly aside, not out of fear, out of respect. They had seen mothers defend their children, but what Catherine displayed was something deeper, something almost regal in its fierceness. William met her halfway. He didn't ask what happened. He could read it on her face. "Come on," he said softly. "Charlotte's waiting." Catherine nodded. As they walked, William wrapped an arm around her back, a silent gesture of solidarity. He wasn't just her husband. He was her partner in all of this, and he admired her more in that moment than any grand royal event could ever inspire. Charlotte looked up when they returned. Her small voice carried the pure innocence Catherine fought so hard to protect. "Are you okay, Mummy?" Catherine knelt, cupping Charlotte's cheek gently. "I'm perfect," she whispered. "And so are you." The little girl smiled. Finally, a real one. And as the three of them walked down the long palace corridor together, something had shifted, not just in their family, but in the royal dynamic itself. For the first time, Catherine's strength was not just felt, it was unmistakably seen. And the palace would not forget this day. The public sees royal guards as emotionless statues, silent, immovable, locked in perfect discipline. But behind their stillness live eyes that miss nothing. And on the day Camilla's remark pierced Princess Charlotte's confidence, no group witnessed more than the guards stationed throughout the palace. Their vantage points weren't glamorous, but they were powerful. Corners, corridors, thresholds, doorways. They became the quiet witnesses to a storm the monarchy would soon pretend never happened. One of the longest-serving guards, Sergeant Allen, had been positioned near the east corridor that morning. He had seen Charlotte skipping softly down the marble hallway just minutes before the incident. She had greeted him with a small wave, the kind children make when they're still deciding whether they're allowed to break formality. She reminded him of Diana, sunshine tucked inside royal protocol. "Morning, Your Highness," he'd said, allowing the tiniest smile. Charlotte giggled and waved again before turning the corner, just in time to walk straight into the sharp energy radiating from Queen Camilla. Alan wasn't close enough to hear the words, but he saw the moment Charlotte's posture changed. The sudden stiffness, the little hands that went still, the eyes that dropped toward the floor. He didn't need audio to understand something hurtful had been said. He had 3 daughters of his own, and children all react the same way to cruelty. Another guard, Private Thompson, witnessed the exchange more clearly. Positioned a few feet away, he had heard Camilla's remark and felt his stomach tighten. Guards didn't flinch. They weren't supposed to, but he felt it, a subtle, instinctive urge to step forward, as if protecting Charlotte was part of his role. Except it wasn't, not in the ways that mattered. He saw Charlotte look down at her dress. He saw the confidence drain from her tiny shoulders. But most importantly, he saw Catherine appear just moments later, her expression shifting from warmth to controlled fire the instant she understood what had happened. Thompson would later describe that moment as the softest storm he'd ever seen. Catherine wasn't loud. She didn't snap, but her presence changed the atmosphere instantly, like a sudden drop in temperature before a thunderclap. Even the guard straightened, not out of protocol, but because something in her posture demanded it. When she calmly confronted Camilla, the guards held their breath. They weren't allowed to react. They weren't allowed to intervene. They existed only to protect physically, never emotionally. But standing in the middle of such tension turned them into unwilling participants, silent pillars in a drama unfolding between royalty. Allen recounted later in a private guard briefing. You could feel the room tighten, like everyone was waiting to see who blinked first. And no one blinked. By the time Catherine led Charlotte away, the guards watched her with a mixture of admiration and quiet respect. She wasn't just a princess in that moment. She was a mother defending her child with a strength so controlled it seemed almost dangerous. But it was what happened next that gave the guards perspective the world would never hear. As Catherine walked Charlotte to safety, Camilla remained in the corridor, visibly rattled, not by guilt, but by the realization that she had crossed an unspoken boundary. Guards were trained to stand still, but they could feel tension like heat, heavy, pressing, lingering. Minutes later, when Catherine returned alone to confront Camilla directly, more guards found themselves stationed nearby. Some pretended to check posture. Some pretended to adjust equipment. All of them were listening. Catherine's voice was low but steady. "You will not belittle Charlotte again." And for the first time, the guard saw Camilla's confidence crack. Not a full break, but a tremor beneath the surface. She hadn't expected Catherine to challenge her. She certainly hadn't expected Catherine to correct her like a subordinate. During that conversation, the guards learned something the outside world rarely sees. Catherine's quiet personality wasn't weakness. Her calm wasn't passiveness. She wasn't made of softness. She was made of steel wrapped in kindness. Private Thompson later said, "I'd never seen her like that. It wasn't anger. It was conviction." Meanwhile, down the hall, Sergeant Allen escorted Prince William toward the lounge. He noticed protective energy around the future king, an energy that intensified the moment William saw his daughter. William didn't need to ask what happened. He read the room instantly. Guards had seen this too. The tightening of his jaw, the flash of emotion in his eyes, the silent alignment beside Catherine. The monarchy loved images of unity, but guards saw when unity was real. Later in the day, during the scheduled public event, the guards observed something else, something subtle but powerful. Catherine walked with Charlotte's hand in hers the entire time. She didn't force closeness. She didn't overcomfort. She simply stayed near enough that Charlotte could feel her strength like an anchor. The photographers saw a sweet family moment. The guards saw protection in its purest form. Even more interesting was the way Camilla kept her distance. She didn't approach Catherine. She didn't look at Charlotte. She didn't speak. She gave wide, careful space, as if afraid of Catherine's silence more than her words. One guard positioned behind the staging area whispered to another, "Whatever happened earlier, it shook her." When the family returned to the palace after the event, the guards noticed even more shifts. William stayed close to Charlotte. He lifted her onto a bench, adjusted her ribbon himself, and whispered something that made her smile again. Catherine watched him with relief, but the guards could still see the controlled storm lingering beneath her calm exterior. Many senior guards had served long enough to compare princesses across generations. They remembered Diana, her warmth, her vulnerability, her courage. And though Catherine carried her own identity, that day they saw a flicker of Diana's fiercest quality, a refusal to let the crown swallow her children. Later that evening, during the guard rotation, the men and women stationed near the private quarters heard subdued conversation between William and Catherine. Not the words, they were too far, but the tone. Soft, steady, united. A partnership. The guards didn't gossip, but they understood royal dynamics better than any newspaper. And from the tone alone, they knew Catherine and William weren't just upset. They were aligned. Completely. By nightfall, quiet murmurs traveled between guard posts throughout the palace. Catherine stood up to her. She defended Charlotte like a lioness. And Camilla didn't push back. Not this time. It wasn't scandal to them. It was respect. They saw Catherine not as a delicate royal figure, but as a mother who stepped forward without hesitation, a woman who understood her power, a future queen who could balance grace with fire when necessary. And although the palace would never release a statement, although reporters would never write the truth, the guards who witnessed every moment carried the real story. They knew who protected the next generation of royals. They knew who the children felt safest with. And they knew that day marked a shift, a subtle but permanent rebalancing of power inside the monarchy. A shift Catherine created not with anger, but with unwavering, quiet strength. The palace was built to hide things. Secrets, tears, arguments, betrayals. Its corridors had swallowed centuries of conflict so silently that the public rarely noticed when storms thunder behind closed doors. But the day Camilla belittled Princess Charlotte, something happened that even the palace couldn't bury completely. A shift, a quiet reordering of power, a realignment of loyalties. And that shift didn't come from the throne, but from Catherine. When night finally settled over the palace, the building felt heavier than usual. Lights dimmed earlier. Staff moved slower. Conversations were whispered, not spoken. You could almost feel echoes of the day humming through the stone walls. Behind the scenes, senior aides had already begun their work. The carefully engineered damage control that kept the monarchy from crumbling every time tensions rose. One of the top aides, an older woman named Julia Harrington, walked briskly through the staff wing, her clipboard tucked under her arm. She was known for being calm under pressure, but today even she looked tense. She had received at least 4 reports from staff members claiming they had accidentally witnessed Catherine confronting Camilla. Even worse, some guards had overheard it, and guards didn't gossip unless something truly unprecedented happened. Julia rubbed her temples as she stepped into the communications room. "All right," she sighed. "What do we know for certain?" Her assistant flipped through notes. "There was a disagreement," he said carefully, "between the Princess of Wales and the Queen." Julia closed her eyes. "Wonderful. And the tone?" "Firm," he replied. "Very firm. And witness?" Julia didn't need details. She already knew what that meant. The palace had hours, maybe minutes, before someone slipped a hint to a tabloid. But even with her decades of experience, something about this felt different. A new energy, a new balance. "Keep everything internal," she ordered. "And absolutely nothing leaves this building." But unknown to her, it already had. Not through gossiping staff, not through sneaky reporters, but through the guards, though not in the way she feared. That night, during the guard shift change, a young guard named Evan spoke quietly to the man replacing him. "She stood up for Charlotte," he whispered. "Properly stood up." The other guard nodded. "Good. Someone needed to." And that was it. Not betrayal, not disloyalty, but admiration. Respect travels, even in silence. Meanwhile, on the other side of the palace, Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bed, brushing a hand over her daughter's hair as she drifted off to sleep. The soft glow from the bedside lamp cast a warm halo across Charlotte's cheeks. So peaceful now, so unaware how fiercely her mother defended her. Catherine stayed for a long moment after Charlotte fell asleep. She watched the steady rise and fall of her breathing. She remembered every insult she had ever endured in the royal system, every judgment, every headline, every whisper behind her back. She had tolerated all of it. But Charlotte? No, never. William entered quietly, leaning in the doorway. He had changed into more comfortable clothes, his expression softer than it had been all day. "She asleep?" he murmured. Catherine nodded gently. Finally, William watched his daughter with the same protectiveness Catherine carried, gentle, quiet, but fierce beneath the surface. Then he spoke in a low voice. "I'm proud of you." Catherine looked down. "I don't want to escalate things." "You didn't," William said. "You drew a line." And she needed to know where that line is. Catherine exhaled, tension slowly leaving her shoulders. "She crossed it today. And you handled it perfectly." They walked out of the room together, closing the door softly behind them. As they moved down the hallway, William hesitated, then asked, "Do you think this will cause trouble?" Catherine gave a faint, tired smile. "In this family, everything causes trouble." But her voice wasn't bitter. It was steady, resilient. She had found her strength today, and she wasn't letting it go. Down the corridor, Camilla stood alone near a window, her silhouette rigid against the faint moonlight. She looked older than usual, tired, shaken, maybe even regretful, not because of public backlash, but because she had underestimated Catherine. She had expected compliance. She had received steel. She watched Catherine and William walk away together, united, talking softly, completely in sync. And Camilla felt something unexpected in her chest, an unsettling mix of guilt and displacement. Not fear, not anger, something simpler, a dawning awareness. The monarchy's future didn't belong to her. It belonged to them, to William, to Catherine, to their children. And Catherine had proven today that she wouldn't let anyone, royal or not, damage that future. Later that night, As the palace settled into uneasy stillness, Julia's predictions came true. Whispers began making their way through the staff, but not maliciously, more like the spreading of a legend. Did you hear how she defended Charlotte? She told the queen off, calm as anything. She didn't even raise her voice. It was the way she said it. She meant every word. The next morning, there was an atmosphere of unexpected respect around Catherine. Not formal respect, personal respect. Staff bowed a little deeper. Guards straightened with a touch more pride. Even senior aides treated her with a newfound caution, one born not of fear, but admiration. And when Catherine walked Charlotte to breakfast, the little princess skipped beside her with her confidence restored, wearing the same pastel outfit from the day before. Someone, likely Catherine, had tied her ribbon perfectly again. William lifted Charlotte into her chair as George and Louis joined the table. Catherine smiled as she poured juice, acting as though nothing unusual had happened. But the family knew, the guards knew, the palace knew. Even Camilla, entering the room with a slower step than usual, knew. And though she kept her distance, she offered a stiff, almost reluctant nod in Catherine's direction, a gesture that wasn't quite an apology, but wasn't defiance either. More like acknowledgement, recognition. The crown had many symbols of power, thrones, jewels, scepters. But real power? Sometimes it was as simple as a mother defending her child without hesitation. That day wasn't documented in any official biography. It didn't appear in any news article. It wasn't spoken about in public. But inside the palace, everyone remembered it. Because it wasn't just the moment Catherine stood up to Camilla. It was the moment the monarchy truly understood the force that Catherine carried. Not loud, not dramatic, but unbreakable. A quiet storm with the strength to protect the future of the crown itself.